Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I just want to make a quick note here to begin with my connection to Squarespace, because I'm a big hockey fan. I try to go to a couple of New York Rangers games every season. And the connection to Anthony is that Squarespace has a prominent ad on the rink board at Madison Square Garden. And when I can't make it to the Garden, I watch the games at home, and I stay and watch the in-between period player interviews, which take place in the Squarespace studio.
Yep.
And I also spend a lot of time driving my own kids to their sports practices, and to kill the time, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and my favorite podcast is 99% Invisible, and one of the sponsors there is Squarespace once again. So when I add it all up, hearing about and seeing Squarespace takes up a lot of my daily time. It's become a big part of my day, and it all culminates in this conversation today with Anthony. So great to have you here, Anthony.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go back in time a little bit here to how you came to form this company that designs websites. It actually came out of a need because you did not like the existing options out there. So let's start there.
Sure. So in the ancient history, so in the very beginning, and this was in 2003, I wanted to make a website for myself, and was looking at what was out there, and I kind of noticed two things. One was that there was not a all-in-one solution, so I had to put up a website that included a page, a blog, a photo gallery. I was putting together different pieces of software, installing those on a hosted system, maintaining the servers, running my own analytics software, all that. And I really didn't like that way of doing things. And secondly, I'm a big kind of design person, and I wanted my site to look good. And I realized that I was going to put this site out there, and how it looked, how it represented my ideas, were going to be how a lot of people perceived me and perceived my ideas. And I was just really frustrated that not a lot of services out there seemed to focus on design. So I started Squarespace for myself because I wanted those two things, and then quickly realized perhaps more people cared about those two things.
Perhaps others would like it too.
Perhaps others might like this.
So you wanted a website, you wanted to form a website. Why? Did you already have a company in mind, or what were you putting out there for everyone?
What's funny about it is this was at a time when blogging was new. And I remember having to explain to people what a blog was. And I wanted to make a blog for myself. And also I worked on these different, I've been a programmer since I was a kid. And so I had these little projects I was working on. I wanted to put them on a website, and I don't know why, I just kind of put them out there. And the irony of it is all that I'm like the world's worst blogger. I think I wrote like 2 blog entries and then just kept working on Squarespace and never went back to it. But yeah, it was that.
Innovation is about solving problems. We like to say that there's a problem being fixed here. You say, or you told me that you were solving the problem of self-expression. Mm-hmm. Explain what that means.
Yeah, I mean, what started as something kind of just for myself, which is like, can I put myself online? Does it look good? Is this easy? Is this something I want to update? You just quickly realize that other people had this problem. And I mentioned blogging. This was at a time on the internet when I think for most people, making a website or putting something online seemed kind of hard. But blogging was something that seemed kind of easy. Like I can type into a box and do this, and anyone can make a blog, and Blogger's easy to use. And so we really kind of anchored the company around blogging in the early days, and just very quickly realized that people were creating blogs for all kinds of reasons. They were creating websites for all kinds of reasons, and it became a kind of interesting problem. Like, how many kinds of sites can you make on Squarespace? Can it be if I want to put a portfolio online, or a small business website, or I'm an author, or I'm a blogger? So we were just kind of really into the technical side of solving that.
Yeah, the different formats that are available. So as a result, your customer base really veers towards independent, creative, almost artistic type people or businesses. How did you figure out that target, or did it kind of happen accidentally? And I'm sure it creates specific opportunities and risks as well.
So we are generally known for having a very creative user base, but I'd actually say a long time ago in the beginning, it wasn't formed exactly like that. I mean, I cared about design, so I think it was naturally something that people who cared about design were more kind of into. Mm-hmm. But really the transformation and the way to get into that audience came in. We relaunched the platform in 2012 or so, and I started rewriting it in 2010 with a small group of people. And from then, it was actually very intentional to target portfolios. We had a lot of people on the platform that were close to the company who were photographers. A lot worked for Squarespace, and at the time when the web was changing, we thought, okay, portfolios are really hard to do visually. And the designs behind those can be used for a variety of things. For instance, you have a web page that's got images and it's scrolling by. That could be a portfolio, but it could also be a coffee shop with that kind of presentation. So we said, if we can solve the websites that are hardest to make, the most visually difficult, we can solve that for other people and apply those techniques elsewhere. In addition, we had a lot of people building sites on the platform, and we were creatives ourselves. A lot of people in the company use Squarespace for their portfolios. And it's a really natural target in a way, because if you think about who's making websites for people, a lot of those people who are working in agencies, working as web designers, are who everyone goes to when they're like, hey, how do I make a website? And if they're overworked, they probably don't have time to make a site for someone themselves. But if we've tapped into their sensibilities, they'll say, hey, maybe you should just try Squarespace out.
So are you meant to bypass those experts, for instance, and is more DIY?
So we have a DIY target, which do it yourself. So basically, people come to the site, they sign up, they can create the site themselves. It definitely doesn't require an expert. That being said, we do have a community of people we call Circle, who are people who build sites for other people. And so we target both, but the marketing is around a DIY tool.
So there's a certain seasonality to your business. Let's say that I wanted to start a site. Why are the odds higher that I would want to launch www.scarletfood.com in the first quarter than any other part of the year?
So we do have a bit of seasonality to the platform for reasons that, we have like working theories on why it might be the case, but I don't really know. Like, why do more people start websites in January, February? I don't know, like some kind of New Year's resolution thing, or like just people don't want to do it in December. You're like home for the holiday. It's like, how many things are you really launching in December? Generally just wait till January. So there's a bit of seasonality around there. And we also see a little bit of seasonality pick back up after the summer. So September. And again, I think it's this like New Year's back to school mentality. We don't have a better explanation for it.
But you're able to plan what you're launching, new tools, for instance, maybe a month or two before you expect a new stream of customers to come online.
I would say that it doesn't affect our product release cycles as much, a little bit, depending on what we're releasing. For instance, we're not going to release a lot of changes to the commerce platform in November, December, when it's everyone's high season. We just kind of wait until January to put a lot of those things out, while in Q4 we're focused on stability. It changes how we advertise, so it changes the waves in which if we know there's going to be a lot of activity around January, we might build up in Q4, make sure in Q1 we've got a really strong campaign launched, and so we build around it a little bit. But for products and whatnot, it generally, for better or worse, we just kind of have to launch them when they're ready.
So how much would Squarespace charge me for scarletfood.com? Has that changed a lot during the time of the company? Is there a one-size-fits-all pricing? Does it matter if I get 1 billion visitors a month or 5 visitors a month?
Yeah, so there's, right now, ever since we introduced a commerce platform, there's basically 4 plan levels, and it's differentiated based on features and if you're using commerce or not. And it's going to range between $10 and $40 a month, roughly.
So it's like rent, basically.
It's like rent,
okay.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter whether you're getting 1 visitor or 1 million visitors. So it's the same price based on traffic.
What happens if I want to branch out and I decide that I have this great website, I blog once in a while, and I want to sell hockey jerseys? What kind of tools do you provide to help with that, or to help me grow my business further?
Yeah, so a long time ago, I was mentioning kind of this all-in-one idea, which is why I started it, right? That I wanted page building software and gallery software and blogging software in one place. So we still have an all-in-one approach these days. It's just around broader sets of things. You're talking about selling. So when we think about our future and we think about where we're going, we think about 3 primary areas. We think about presence, which is, could you get your website? We think, and do you get your domain on it? We think around commerce. So can I sell online? Can I accept donations? Can I transact with my customers in multiple ways? And we think about marketing tools, and that's like things like, can I send my customers an email? And we have an email product that just went live in early access in June, and will be out of beta and everything by the end of this year. So you can transact on the platform. I think the commerce how we're oriented with commerce is, it started with simple commerce as an add-on. I'm a restaurant. Can I sell gift cards? Can I sell T-shirts? I'm a band. Can I sell merchandise? And what we're really starting to do is just really diversify that commerce platform and say, okay, can I put up a paywall? What about bookings? And we're thinking about the different ways people transact online outside of just e-commerce and providing solutions for them.
What if I decide content is what I'm really focused on, but I start posting really offensive material, and there's a petition circulating that's gotten tens of thousands of signatures demanding that you remove me from the Squarespace platform? And I guess what I'm getting at is what is acceptable content versus stuff that you just won't tolerate, even though I can say, hey, I'm protected by the First Amendment.
Yeah. That's not your plan, right? No?
Not yet.
Okay, I just want to know so we can flag it. No, I mean, look, we as a platform are a little bit lucky in that we've been spared kind of the worst of this stuff that's happening. Because I mean, Squarespace is a tool to help people succeed, online and help them with their entrepreneurial success. And that's why we do things like the presence platform, the commerce platform, and all that. And in addition, it's a paid service, so we are spared like the worst of the, crazy crap that appears online when you've got, a free platform out there. Generally, if I'm asking you for your credit card, you're not going to just pay for Squarespace with your real name and then issue death threats. Yeah, there's a real person there. That said, our policies have had to evolve over time with respect to how we approach dangerous content on the platform. And I think us and a lot of the other tech companies are kind of really learning and reshaping what we're doing to figure out what we find to be acceptable use. And in a few cases, we've had to make a decision to remove some people from the platform that didn't align with some of our values. And look, we're a business. We're not the government, and we're not going to spend a huge amount of time and effort defending stuff that isn't why we started the platform anyway.
And one of those people that was removed was Richard Spencer. You took him off the platform in August of 2017.
Yep.
What was his response?
That was one of the people removed. For those of you who don't know, that's one of the names mentioned a lot in connection with the Charlottesville incident. And so my concern with removing him was that, he's just going to recreate that site somewhere else in 24 hours and use the I got kicked off victim card to really amplify a message that's going to exist there anyway. Squarespace is different in a lot of ways than the other big platforms because we don't control distribution. It's not like you're posting onto Facebook and then Facebook decides whether it reaches 1 million people or one person. We're kind of like the paper company, and people write bad things on paper sometimes.
One size fits all, one visitor or 100
or 100 visitors.
Yep.
And so this is kind of weird. So we kicked him off, and within 24 hours, his site appeared somewhere else. Great. He was pretty. He's actually pretty nice about the whole thing.
He even complimented you guys at one point, right?
It was bizarre. He was on some like weird alt-right thing the next day. And people asked about like, oh, you kicked Squarespace off. You kicked off Squarespace, and he's like, he was kind of like he thought it was a real shame.
He liked what you offered. He liked the design of the websites.
I suppose so.
What did you learn? What have you learned, and what are you learning about privacy, data protection these last few months? I mean, what's the takeaway for you?
Yeah, well, like all other large tech companies, we the GDPR. Rules are something that we have to implement. While it's sometimes tough inside a company when you're working on the product, you want to work on product features and things that the users are seeing, and the next commerce feature and all that. I actually think that the GDPR regulations, while a little difficult for us to implement, are actually quite good. I mean, like I as a consumer kind of want that. I want if I ask a company to remove my content that it goes away. So that's something we do. Generally, I mean, Squarespace is it's not affected by that in the same way like a Facebook or a Twitter might be affected by that because generally you're putting content on Squarespace to publish it to the world. So we don't have a lot of like secret content or private content on the platform. There is some behind password protected fields, but yeah, it's you're putting it out there to put it live, and the other personal information we have on you is really whatever your address is for billing purposes, and that's why we have that. So yeah, I mean, we're implementing it, and I think those rules are good, and yeah, that's kind of how we've engaged with it.
And you're not monetizing the data that you do have on the customers that you do have. You're not selling it in any other way.
No, absolutely not. So I mean, in Squarespace, well, one, you're generally publishing your site to other people, and I guess we would have statistics across like all the sites, which are like, maybe we could pull out browser trends or things like that, which we might publish, and maybe it wouldn't be personally identifiable in any way. But no, we don't sell any data or anything like that.
All right, so let's talk about your management philosophy, because you went from a one-man show in your dorm room of University of Maryland to building a team, and you had to delegate responsibility. You had to become a manager, learn to how to become a manager.
Yeah.
When Squarespace started, you were doing everything yourself, and at some point, you must have realized this can't go on. This is unsustainable. Yeah. What was that aha moment that made you say, okay, I've got to branch out. I've got to hire people?
Yeah. So in the early days of Squarespace, I did a lot myself, probably too much myself, and that impacted my health in various ways. But it became at a point where, and there were good parts about that too. I think it was good because I would set up the servers and run the infrastructure and write the marketing things and run the AdWords accounts and do the coding.
And you were in school at the same time?
In the beginning, I was.
Okay.
Yeah, because I launched it it launched in 2004. I graduated in 2005. So I was doing a lot. I was doing a lot myself. I think at some point, I don't remember exactly when it was, and I had this mentality of like, I think you fall back to. I think sometimes it's easy to fall back on your strengths when you want to solve a problem. So I was an engineer, and I was just like, I'm going to engineer my way out of the scaling problem. I'm gonna, right? Like, it sounds ridiculous, but like, it was easier for me.
Like Matt Damon in The Martian.
Like Matt Damon in The Martian. But it was easier for me to sit there and write more code and solve things than it was for me to like wake up one day and try and figure out like, how do I hire people? I don't have a network. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to like interview anybody. It was just like, so I kept falling back on that weakness, and I think, or on that strength. And I think that one of the situations I ended up getting in, it's like, I remember just setting even like really basic goals for myself. Like I was like, I want to have this feature out in 2 months, and I'm coding it myself or whatever. And like 2 months would pass. I'm like, what happened here? Well, I did my taxes. I answered all the support. Like I incorporated this thing. I patched all this crap. Like I didn't get anywhere.
Right.
And
you're like a hamster in a wheel.
Yeah, I'm a hamster in a wheel. I'm still a hamster in a wheel. But like I haven't figured that one out yet. But yeah, I mean, just I realized I wasn't making progress, and so I decided to change that, and I joined up with some people, and we started that journey towards. Yeah, I guess you say I had to learn to become a manager. Yeah, that took a while.
What was the first thing that you delegated?
The first thing I started to delegate was actually stuff around customer support. Mm-hmm. So I hired part-time support people to help me, answer the questions. And then the second thing was actually around some of the template designs. I always kind of knew that I wanted to engage with a number of different creative personalities in order to like get a variety of templates and views represented on the platform. So it was actually those two things.
So what can you not delegate? Because once you start, it kind of feeds on itself, right? You can hire a team, you can get someone on customer service, you can bring in engineers to help code, or can everything be delegated? I mean, what's the thing that you need to preserve for yourself?
You definitely can't delegate the mission or the vision, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I think there are certain aspects of, I don't think you can delegate the DNA and the building of the DNA. I think that's up to you to figure out who's in and who's out and what configuration people are in. I don't think there's anyone on your team that can just figure that out for you. You've got to pick that. And I think that depending on how you engage with those things, your company will have different kinds of output. And the way I spend my time from day to day and week to week now is trying to spend like it on things where I'm uniquely, hopefully, either good or I can lend a perspective to something that other people in the company might not have. Like I have, like these weekly product reviews now, which are some of my best time spent every week. And I have a particular viewpoint on the way the product should be and the way the details should go. And I'm responsible for keeping these diverse groups coherent and making sure that it reaches a final result. So.
And making sure that it's in line with your vision from beginning to end.
Yeah, and the mission. And to make sure that those things evolve over time, right? I mean, while a lot of our values are the same as when we started, we started as a blogging platform, right? And we're much more in the blogging platform right now. So at various junctures, it's got to be okay to say, okay, we're gonna do more. That's it. Our ambition can evolve. So.
Something you spend a lot of time thinking about is operating within limitations, and this could be from a design perspective, but I wanted to talk about it from a financial perspective. You've disagreed with venture capitalists who encourage people to raise as much money as they possibly can because their service or their product is really in the zeitgeist, or financing is cheap. There's a lot of money swarming around looking for a home. Why is that? Why should you hold off on raising as much money as you can?
So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer here, but I can answer it from your perspective. For my business.
Yeah.
Because there's certainly other businesses that are very capital-intensive up front, right? And you're going to have a burn rate, and you're going to need a runway, and you definitely don't want to operate out of a situation where you don't know if you're going to evaporate in 3 months because you didn't raise enough money. Now, that being said, I operated the business to essentially cash flow break even from the very beginning. And so I didn't really need to raise, in my view, outside capital. And for a while, it was just me running it. And so, it was able to, reach a level where always generating a good amount of money. I also think that instilled a level of kind of financial discipline on the company, where I think if I had raised, millions and millions of dollars, I would have probably felt the need to spend it. Otherwise, why would I have raised it? And I'm not sure I could have done that very well. And so I think that factor of kind of, make money, spend money, and keep it to break even was really good for this. Also, I mean, if you don't know what you're going to do with the money, why would you suffer the dilution? Like, it doesn't add up to me. And so when we have raised money, it's been for very specific reasons, and that's just kind of how we've operated.
So you can say general working capital, but you knew exactly where that money was going to.
Yeah.
Now, you're profitable. You said that you're break even from day one.
Yep.
Why stay private? Why not tap the public markets?
So we're a late stage private company at this point. We're bigger than some of our competitors when they decided to go public. And I think that we take steps internally to ensure that if and when we ever would want to be a public company, that that we can do that. But really, we haven't needed to, and we're just sort of taking our time to make sure that if and when we decide to do that, it's a smooth transition.
And when you talk about your competitors, if they include Wix or GoDaddy, wouldn't going public be the ultimate expression of operating within limitations? You've got shareholders telling you what you can and can't do. You've got the threat of activist investors. I mean, there's a discipline there.
Yeah, sounds lovely. I would not want to do that. No. I mean, again, as part of us operating the way we're operating, and kind of our internal planning, we do conduct ourselves in a lot of ways like a public company would. And I've actually found that stuff to be kind of valuable. I mean, again, if you're in my position, sort of like, well, there's benefits to being public. Your stock is liquid. You've got RSUs. People can access that. The value of their shares when they vest. Your valuation. I mean, you operate a little bit as a discount as a private company versus a public company in terms of share value, just because the shares are liquid, so there's less of a market for them. But what I found is that internally when we start to do our thing where we look at the company like an analyst would look at the company, I think that it does a kind of a great thing internally. I mean, you could be spending a lot on your R&D, and I could be investing along the way, and at certain juncture points, you kind of take a look at it and you go, well, I just doubled my R&D spend. Did I really double my output? And it starts conversations internally where, if somebody's being really short-term focused and they want a result in the quarter right away, I think that's pretty unhealthy. But I think that some of those questions an analyst could ask are incredibly valid about the operations of your business. So I think it would be, obviously validating to be a public company because it's an amazing step. But to me, it's a financial event, and it's just one step along the way.
No pressure from your investors to do so?
No. The market is such right now that, if early stage investors needed to get liquidity, they could easily get liquidity from a lot of later stage private investors.
You say that there's still a lot more you want to do. You started off as a blogging site, then you're helping businesses grow, offering them tools. You're focusing now on helping customers sell their products through their sites, and that means e-commerce, international growth.
Yep.
Inevitably, that brings up the behemoth, which is Amazon, and going up against an Amazon. So talk a little bit about that challenge.
Yeah, from a commerce perspective, I guess you could, from an e-commerce perspective, I suppose that there's something there, but I would think that the Squarespace platform would be kind of complementary in the sense that if you were using Squarespace or one of our competitors to have an independent commerce site, you could also, Amazon has integrations where your products can also exist within their marketplace. And further, if you're a small company, small brand trying to grow, I think you're trying to differentiate based on your story. And I think Squarespace can help people tell their story and grow that way. So I don't really see it in competition as much with Amazon. And in addition, e-commerce is just one aspect of commerce online. Especially when you look at our customer base, you've got people selling goods, you've got people selling digital goods, you've got subscriptions, you've got bookings engines, you've got paywalls, you've got all these different ways to transact that apply to our customer base that are really, not something Amazon does.
What about apps, the rise of apps? Is that a competition for you, or how does that affect what you do? Does a business need a dedicated website if they can just build an app?
Yeah, so I've had a particular stance on this for a long time, which is that I don't believe that most of the customers of our service should have an app as well as their website for deploying content for a number of reasons. I don't know how you guys use your phones, but I don't really generally like installing an app for every single website I visit. That would be sort of weird. I have a couple concentrated apps that are around particular services. So, I might do a couple top news sites or Amazon or things like that. So I'm really an app for a platform makes sense to me, not for an individual website. I don't think consumers are installing apps like that. I don't think that's a great way to browse content. Linking doesn't work. There's a lot of reasons to
So we're past peak app then?
I think for our kind of customers, I think that there's specialized reasons why you might want an app around something you're doing, but I don't think it replaces a website, no.
But you don't have any plans to expand into apps or doing anything like that? It's still a website-based platform?
Yeah, exactly. We don't have any plans to make a app building thing so that you can, your content makes an app. And I think there's actually, I think that's been tried a little bit, and I think that people have run into some issues with the App Store and Apple not wanting people to do that. So no, there are no plans.
And the economics also don't favor the small guy. Apple and Google taking a big cut as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do an app. If it was a for-pay thing, yeah, that would be not so great.
So we mentioned that you founded the company in your dorm room at University of Maryland. You're from Maryland originally, from Northern Maryland. Why base Squarespace in New York? Why not in Maryland, where you grew up, or Silicon Valley for that matter? Why does New York make sense for you?
So I'd be partially lying if I didn't admit it was for personal reasons. I've always loved New York. Ever since I visited New York, there's a particular energy and creative spirit here that is just absolutely incredible. And you don't find elsewhere. And I think that what's been amazing about basing Squarespace here is that kind of is in the DNA of the company. I think that we're a unique tech company in the sense that we really do balance creative and engineering in a way that is really different than others. In addition, a lot of our customers are here, right? A lot of the entrepreneurs, the musicians, the artists, all the industries that Squarespace wants to service are in New York. So it's kind of good to be around that DNA and part of it. I think that it's also given us access to a particular pool of design talent that I'm not sure existed in other markets. And look, in the early years, it was more difficult to do the engineering hiring here and all that because there were less I think there's less of that talent set here, but I think it actually has always sort of been here. It's just been in banks or in different forms. And the tech community has evolved a lot here, and I think that's amazing for ourselves and everyone else in the tech community. And it's great. I mean, you can be in New York as an engineer now, and you can work for some of the biggest tech companies on the planet in a remote office, or you can work at a startup, or you can work kind of anywhere in between, and we're somewhere in between.
So the New York tech scene has grown up, it's evolved, and you're able to tap that talent effectively. Let's go back to where I started, which was advertising.
Yeah.
How often do people get you confused with Square or Foursquare?
It depends on the year. That has changed over time. Look, I mean, these days, sometimes we do get mixed up with Square a little bit, especially now that we both do commerce. But I don't know the solve for that one.
Well,
Foursquare less these days.
More advertising, certainly
More
is one way to
advertising.
do it.
We'll definitely try and do that.
Well, you've become very visible of late with
Yeah.
sponsorships, with branding. I mentioned the partnership with Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
You also sponsored the New York Knicks' jersey, right?
Yep, through the Madison Square Garden sponsorship, exactly.
And you're sponsoring podcasts.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about why you've been so out front in sponsoring podcasts. Why this particular medium, and how do you measure its effectiveness?
Yeah, podcast was a great one for us. I don't know when our first podcast ad was, but it was probably like almost a decade ago at this point, which is crazy. And we were there very early on in that medium. And what's been great about it is, especially back then, it was really under the radar for a lot of companies. A lot of big advertisers didn't understand what podcasts were, or how to buy on them, or anything else. So we were very kind of guerrilla in our approach to it at the time. And so we would go out there and go to a show host and be like, hey, can we work on a deal, something. And they would oftentimes say yes. We would form a relationship with the show host so that they understood the product, and we could work with them on how they talked about the product. And I think a combination of those things was just, it really resonated with audiences. I mean, people fall in love with the podcast and the podcast hosts that they're into, and they want to support those shows, and they like that Squarespace is helping support their show. And there's just an authentic thing that rings true there. You also asked about attribution. So depending on where we're marketing, and we market across every channel on the planet, basically, almost. We'll try and measure it in a lot of ways, like post-checkout surveys, coupons, various things to try and get a read on how things are doing.
And you also advertised in the Super Bowl as well, right? In 2014, there was a John Malkovich ad.
We have advertised in the Super Bowl 5 times. So last year's Keanu Reeves, we did something with him, and then the year before that was John Malkovich, which was a really fun one, which we won an Emmy for, which was kind of cool.
Of course, for a company that dabbles with design, or that masters in design, it makes a lot of sense.
It was really cool for us because, we work with a lot of small creative firms, and we have a lot of creative talent in-house too. And so, that collaboration produced that result. But yeah, it's really cool.
And how much more are you going to be spending in the coming year? Do you figure that out in advance, or is it kind of dependent on the feedback that you get from people?
We figured it out in advance, but it's of course dependent on the feedback. I mean, like if we were, we'll spend in, ad channels up until we see certain levels of diminishing returns, and then we'll pull back and things like that. And certain kinds of advertising is more brand building and long term than it is like, hey, we're measuring the result of that thing on this one date. And so it's a combination of those factors that depends. That determines what we'll spend, but we'll spend over $100 million next year on advertising.
Before I turn things over to the audience and open it up, I wanted to ask one final question about diversity. How are you tracking your hiring and your representation of women, of minorities, and making sure that you're not falling behind there?
Yeah, so I think as a company grows, you can invest in this more and more, and I don't think that we have this right now. Earlier this year, we hired a director of D&I, diversity and inclusion, who can spend time with a number of different groups inside the company to try and figure out, how we're doing there and keep this in people's minds. We do a lot of different things to attempt to remove bias from the hiring process. Frankly, we did a lot with internal leveling to just get normalization around pay scales in the company, which lets us then have even the language to talk about like how we're doing. Yeah, and so I think we're somewhere along, I would say, the beginning of that journey, not towards the end of it.
All right, a work in progress then. Let's open things up to the audience. Raise your hand if you have a question. We'll start in the middle here.
Sure.
Gentleman over here in the second row.
Yeah, I think you.
We're going to get a
Oh,
microphone
never mind.
over to you
Yeah.
so you don't have to shout.
Cool.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'm Dick Reisman. I'm doing some work in monetizing content, and it would seem, given your focus on creative content, that that's sort of a central question, and I'm curious what you're doing in terms of subscriptions, memberships, Patreon-style models. Is that something that you see yourself building, or do you just work with other companies that are providing those services, and where do you see it going in terms of better models?
Yeah, so I can't get too far into the details of our roadmap, but suffice to say, when I think about the future of commerce on our platform, it is not just e-commerce. So a lot of the things you said are of interest to me. We're still kind of getting together how we plan on going through that. Yeah, I can't get too far into our roadmap, but I think there's a lot of interesting things going on. I think you mentioned a lot of those models that are going to make some sense for companies moving forward.
In other words, watch this space.
Yes.
Next. Back there, please.
How you doing? So
Hi.
I noticed that you said that you're going to get more into e-commerce. So my thing is creating a universal platform as opposed to all-in-one, where competing with a company like Amazon, where a platform on Squarespace can now have products integrate through an API to the platform and then sell product, as opposed to getting an affiliated marketing license to now take the user to the product site for them to buy there. You guys get into that or no?
What was the question?
So, for instance, would you guys be able to allow for
API access?
API access to the platform on Squarespace to allow products to be bought on Squarespace from another platform, so you can have like differentiated areas and where the product is coming from?
Yeah. So as our commerce product has evolved, one of the things that was a really highly requested feature was API access specifically to the commerce platform. And we have rolled out and or are rolling out orders and inventory APIs, which would enable a third party to do exactly what you're describing. We wouldn't probably integrate with the marketplace ourselves, but you could write something that if you were a Squarespace customer, you could have access to their inventory. So.
In the back row over here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Andrea Madho, co-founder and CEO of Lab 141. We're a fashion tech startup. And so I want to ask you, as a founder, you talked a little bit about raising money and dilution. I have this 51% number that flashes constantly because I feel like I don't own my company after that. And I've been talking about raising money. It's a racket. It's like a Ponzi scheme where you're constantly being asked about your next round.
Yeah.
It is. So I would like you to maybe talk about that as a founder and that whole 51% dilution, lack of control, if it's something you think about or not.
Well, the first thing I would react to is I don't understand why the percentage of ownership structure has to be conflated with control. So you have lots of examples out there of public companies that are controlled because of a super voting share class. Facebook's a prime example of that. You can also structure it such that you have board control, but maybe not, other kinds of controls. Anytime you're accepting an investment from an investor, they're going to need certain kinds of controls. Otherwise, you could just make your salary all the money in the company, and that wouldn't really be fair. That's kind of against the terms of the investment. But I think there's creative ways to split the notion of control with the percentage ownership. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't know, but you might look into some of that stuff. So.
But do you agree with the idea that once you hit 51%, you lose everything?
No, I think that again, prime example. You can negotiate different rights on those preferred shares. You can negotiate super voting shares. You can do all kinds of things. It's not that you'll get those things necessarily, but they're certainly out there.
But the market frowns upon that. Investors often, we at Bloomberg always write, Mark Zuckerberg controls all the voting shares. So that's seen as a knock against the company.
Well, I mean, it's funny because we're at Bloomberg. It's a controlled company. But
we're not public at all. We're not
And I
public.
think a great thing for the
We're not
company.
public.
I'm a huge fan. So
Not public.
not public. Well, neither is a private tech startup, but we're going there. Look, I think can be parameters on it that make some sense. I certainly think that if you own one share in the company and you control the entire destiny of it, that probably doesn't work. But I think if you control 40% of the company, and I don't know, I mean, the shares can sunset. They can be, have
There's ways
transfer
around it.
restrictions. There's lots of parameters that go into those kinds of shares, some of which are viewed rather unfavorably, some of which people are willing to digest. And, that's that. I mean, I think that, yeah.
All right, sounds good. Over here, please.
Hi there. You briefly mentioned your competitors, and I was wondering, how do you compare yourself in terms of at what point of your company did you feel like you've reached this point of success, and how do you see yourself staying at that level in the future?
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said, what level did you think you reached a point of success? And I'm sort of like, did we? Which
You're always
sounds
questioning
which
that.
sounds crazy, but like I really don't feel like we've won. Like, I mean, we haven't. Some of our competitors have, more customers. They're some of them are certainly aggressive. Some of them are beating us out in certain international markets. Sometimes they pull ahead on the feature and we'll fall behind on the feature, depending on where we are in our product life cycle. So I don't think we won. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, at some point, I guess I did have to, after you do this for forever, like, I mean, 10 years ago, especially being in New York, I'd be out or something, you introduce yourself to something, like, oh, what do you do? And I'd be like, I used to say I'm just a programmer because I didn't want to deal with the question. And then, somebody's like, oh, I have a company called Squarespace. And it's funny over the years, it's like, oh, somebody goes, oh, I've heard of it, like one in never, 1 in 50 times, 1 in 20 times, most of the time, a lot of the time. And now it's sort of like, I don't even know what to say. They're like, what are you doing? I have a company called Squarespace. They're like, of course. I'm like, not of course. I don't know. 5 years ago it wasn't of course.
New York Knicks, come
like,
on.
I don't know. So I don't know. It's funny how the perception changes over the years. But it doesn't really change how I think about the company and think about winning. I mean, I just want us to be, I don't think competitors beat each other. I don't think Coke beats Pepsi and then it's gone, or Pepsi beats Coke and then it's gone. These are just different things. I remain more worried about our own internal execution than I am about how any particular competitor is doing. Am I aware of how they're doing? Sure, but I try not to spend all my time on that.
We had a question over here, a gentleman in the baseball hat.
Yeah.
You just said you were a programmer. What is your thought on the no-code, low-code movement?
The what?
The no-code,
Or low-code movement?
Since you're a programmer.
What's no code, low code? Can you explain?
As I understand, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically a lot of platforms out there that let you create apps or business processes without actually having to write Java or JavaScript, right? Yeah. So
Similar to
Squarespace.
Squarespace.
In a way.
Correct.
Yeah,
Where you're
in a
able to
way.
create a website without really coding HTML or
Yeah.
CSS or even no.
For sure. I think it can have its applications. I am not familiar in a consumer space of where it makes a ton of sense. I think there's some pretty successful, enterprise applications of that, which have pretty sophisticated platforms, but are automating business processes with low code or a no code environment. But yeah, I haven't seen it apply to consumers particularly yet, because generally what happens is when you open up a platform and you can make any app with it you want, it generally means that you have an interface on that. It's very hard to tailor the interface to that process in a way that consumers need. So if I made a blogging platform in a low-code environment, it probably wouldn't be as good as the blogging platform we create when we know it's a blogging platform from day one and we are in every detail of code. And so it's just a level of polish with which you want to get things at. Maybe those environments will eventually get there, but I just haven't seen great results in my space, but I certainly don't know everything that's going on.
Before I forget, how did you come up with the name Squarespace?
Yeah, everyone asks that. So I wanted something that was easy to say, that I could get the .com, .net, and .org for, because they were unregistered, because I didn't have any money. And so they weren't registered. They had 0 Google results, right? It was amazing. And I don't know, there were 2 things. It was like Squarespace, like I guess screens were more square back at the time, and it was like your space within the screen, so that kind of worked. And then I also thought that I could like make a really simple logo for it or something. Like this was in my head, like I could make some kind of square thing. And like the irony of that is like, I don't even know if I could draw our interlocking S logo from memory right now. So that was a funny twist, but yeah, it's kind of that.
Did you have a backup name in mind if Squarespace was taken?
There was no backup. If it wasn't Squarespace, I was just gonna go home. It's just over.
Question from this side of the audience.
I'm defeated.
In the back row, please.
Yeah.
How are you? My name is Sam. I'm a first-time founder. You had mentioned earlier that you didn't have much of a network early on.
Yeah.
I'm looking to recruit a team right now of engineers and some people. Any advice as a first-time founder really trying to recruit when you don't have all the credibility in the world?
Oh man, that's a really tough one. I mean, this was always the hardest thing for me. I was at an event recently and there was a founder talking, and he's like, "Who are your early employees?" And he's like, "Oh, all my friends from school." I'm like, lucky. Like, that's cool. And, you know, actually Maryland, I went to University of Maryland. It actually has a good computer science program, but, you know, for whatever reason, I didn't keep in touch with some people, and I moved to New York, and there's, you know, not a real guarantee that people are just going to move to New York. Advice early on with recruiting. God, I mean, for me, it was about getting traction in the company before I started adding people on, and so I could show some success there. I will say that something I didn't want to admit to myself at the time, but actually did help me, is the investment from that we got from the 2 VCs 7 years in, Index and Excel. I think that helped a lot of people who might have been a little bit more skeptical about joining the like my solo little entrepreneurial show. Were at least comforted a bit by the fact that these 2, you know, well-renowned, you know, firms with a good reputation were willing to like, yeah, I was a sole founder. We're willing to kind of go into it under the hood and be like, nah, this checks out, kind of. I mean, you know, it's an early stage investment, so it's the companies when they're smaller, a bit of their messes. We were certainly a mess. We still are a mess in some ways. But yeah, so that validation works. I know, are you like depends on your skill set. I was not a programmer, so I was an engineer and a little bit of a designer. So I felt like I could have that conversation a little bit more. Yeah, again, I haven't done it for a bit, so yeah.
Who did you bounce ideas off of? You're a sole founder, so you didn't have anyone to turn to say, well, what do you think about this, or how about this person?
Well, I'm asking. I don't know. I ask everybody what they think if they'll listen.
So you're crowdsourcing.
Yeah, just everyone's my therapist. So yeah, it's great.
The world is your rabbi.
The world is, yeah.
Any questions from here?
Yeah.
Gentleman over here.
How's it going?
Hi.
I'm Ron, CEO of Bowtie. It's also focused on SMB tech. So I'm curious, during that first 7 years, you know, investors always say, like, these people never want to pay, it's impossible, they're always looking for free. What was your kind of strategies to grinding it out during that period before people knew who you were and what you were up to?
So,
Good question.
with respect to that free versus paid thing, in the first year of Squarespace, we actually did have a free plan for like, it might have even been less than a year. And because I had heard this like, you know, oh, it's going to be a freemium model and people are going to sign up and it's free and then blah, blah. I think for some businesses that can make sense. For a business like Dropbox, makes complete sense. You go, you use it, you're out of space, you're buying more, that's it. Like, got it. Squarespace, when I looked at our customers, or I looked at our users, I should say, because they weren't customers, and I looked at the people who were on the free plan and how they were using it, I was like, early on, I was like, whoa, this isn't why I really started this. I didn't really want to compete with like LiveJournal. Like I wanted, you know, this person's not upgrading ever. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I kind of was like, look, I want to shift it. I want this to be a little bit more professional. And I think that if people value that, they can pay me whatever it was back then, $7 a month. You know, and I really took that seriously. It was like, if I'm not providing, if they're not willing to pay me anything, like, that's weird. You know, and so I wanted to, and we're not expensive. I mean, especially for a small business. I mean, $10 a month, like, come on. So I actually use that as kind of like the mirror on reality. Like, is this worth anything to people or not? And so I think we shifted out of the free stuff very quickly. User count goes way down, but paying count goes way up. And at least people know what they're there for, and it helped us focus, you know, what we wanted to go after. So, yeah, I think you should test people's willingness to pay.
Who was your first paying customer or user? Sorry.
God, I don't remember. It's probably like one of my friends. They probably churned in a month.
Okay, that was my second question. Are they still around?
No, I don't know.
All right, last question from the audience.
This was 15 years ago.
15 years ago. Right here in the middle, please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this lovely talk. You touched on it briefly for a moment when you said that you're looking to tap into like creatives and musicians and artists. What are you looking to do in terms of influencer marketing when it comes to Gen Z? Because as we all know, by the next few years, 50% of the population is going to be like entrepreneurs. So what are you looking to do to tap into that core demographic?
Well, I really hope what you're saying comes true, because that would be like amazing for Squarespace. Look, we do a lot. I think we, you know, we've been active on things like Instagram and trying to figure out, like, if you think about it, like, entrepreneurs are kind of our heroes, and like it's like Nike, like athletes are their heroes, and so we want to get in front of people and prop them up wherever we can. And I think that there's a lot of people who have social presence that a lot of people who are trying to get started, they learn from, and they look at their how-tos and the tutorials, and they want to kind of follow what they're doing. And so we're kind of all over that. I don't have any like one particular model of how kind of we're engaging with influencer marketing. We're trying a bunch of different things, but it's something we try and do. But I really hope 50% of people are going to be entrepreneurs. That would be amazing.
Thank you very much for.
Thank you for having me.